And we are back live on Skywatchers Radio. Welcome back, everybody. Again, we are live now with John Hanson, and I want to welcome him to the show and say just really what a pleasure it is to be able to meet you, talk to you, and really to thank you. I want to thank you right off the bat because it's really, really early in the morning where you are right now, and you stayed up to be on this show, and I really appreciate it, and I really want to say that right off the bat, sir.
Thank you. That was the least I could do as we blundered into each other unintentionally many hours ago. But it's worth staying up all night for the pleasure.
And it really was kind of a funny situation, but we're here now, and we have a lot of people listening in, John, and I really wanted to kind of get a little bit of your backstory, because you started off as a police officer. How did you go from a police officer to somebody interested in the subject of ufology and UFOs?
Right. Well, I did nearly 30 years with the police, and half of it was in the CID, or Detective Division. And in 1995, just after I'd retired from the force, I was actually, it was a pivotal sort of time in my life when I was lying on the settee watching X-Files, and there was an Iraqi pilot that chased a UFO. So, I watched this, and to me, it wasn't reality at all. But I enjoyed watching the X-Files, and the phone rang, and my son, he's a serving officer now. He was then a police constable, and now he's a chief inspector. So that shows you how much time has elapsed. He told me, he said, "Look, Dad, you're not going to believe it," but he said, "I've seen a flying saucer." So of course, my reply to him was fairly caustic and quite profane, because I thought he was pulling my leg. And the next day he came to see me, and he told me what had happened, and briefly, following a number of reports of objects being seen over the city centre, Birmingham city centre, a doctor saw this object disappear behind some trees, and my son, who was with a policewoman, went to have a look, and obviously pretty sceptical, and he saw this saucer-shaped object surrounded with a blue field of energy with a thin, rippling red line running through it. And within seconds, it shrank into itself and disappeared. Huh. And that was the trigger, if you like, because prior to then, all of the years I'd been in the force, I'm sorry, but if somebody had come up to me and said, I wanted to report a flying saucer or a UFO, I would have thought that, A, they probably had too much to drink, or B, they certainly deserved some psychiatric treatment. So I was naive, I was ignorant, and it was only from that time onwards that I was curious enough to find out if there was any foundation to such reports. And I'm still researching now, all of these years later, and it's taken me this time to eventually do what I always wanted to do, was publish some books which are reliant on a day-by-day account of UFO activity. So I'm not talking about random UFO accounts. This is day-by-day, and it took us all of these years to put together, and we've been pretty thorough. Now,
when you say a day-by-day account, expand on that a little bit.
Well, let me say, during 1967, in October 67, there was a huge wave of sightings, not only in Great Britain, but also in the United States, involving police officers that allegedly followed Venus. Well, this wasn't right at all. Sort of from the 24th to the 29th of October, every half an hour somebody had seen something. And I actually tracked down 2 police officers that had chased these objects down in Devon, in the West Country of England. Went to meet them personally, interviewed them, and interviewed so many others, and it was pretty clear from the stories that these people gave me, this wasn't Venus or a weather balloon or whatever. I mean, I don't think we have many weather balloons over here, but it clearly was a cross-shaped object. So the flying cross was a short-lived phenomenon, both in the States and in England. But of course, the flying cross, in my opinion, represented part of an object, only part of the object. and as I say, these things have been seen in various guises for many years. So that's what myself and my partner decided to do, was write it up. But easier said than done. And but we are proud of what we've written, and we've not made any money out of it, and we in fact lost money. But I'm very passionate about this, because this is social history. This is our own social history and yours, and we have a right. It should be recorded rather than kicked into the bin.
John, you know what's funny about that? In about, I would say, a couple of years, maybe 50 years after disclosure happens, there are going to be books written about our real history, and it's going to rewrite the history that we've been force-fed for the last couple hundred years. And you're absolutely right. This is part of our real history.
Amen. Amen.
The Roswell crash, I believe that happened. I believe that's part of our historical fact, and all that stuff will be in the records. There's so many different cases though that have happened over the last 50 to 100 years. Which one really stands out in your mind as the most important case that you researched?
Well, I certainly looked at many in places like Australia, and also some of the incidents in the United States absolutely fascinate me. But some of the most important ones over here have been with pilots that I've interviewed, and a classic case is is a guy called Flight Lieutenant James Salandin, who's a personal friend of mine to this present day, and Jimmy Salandin. He sighted a saucer-shaped object from the cockpit of his Vampire jet, back in 1954. And after he'd landed, he told the intelligence officer, a friend of his called Derek Dempster, who was in fact the first editor of Flying Saucer Review. I don't know if you've heard of Flying Saucer Review.
Oh, definitely. Yep.
Yeah, well, I actually met Gordon Creighton, the editor, and
okay.
He made me a consultant, which means actually, as we say over here, bugger all, I suppose. But because the magazine's folded many years ago, but it was a privilege to meet people like that, because he's been doing it for many years. And going back to the sighting, this was reported to the intelligence officer, and then reported to the Prince Philip's equerry, his secretary, and Prince Philip was appraised of the sighting. So, I mean, royalty has been very interested in UFOs ever since, and protocol demands that I cannot tell you who actually reads our books as well. But yeah, but
really?
They are read. They are read, and I'm proud of that fact, and that people, judge me rational, sane, and logical, rather than a crackpot. And unfortunately, in this business, there are some crackpots, and these.
Oh, definitely.
These are not the witnesses. These are not the UFO witnesses at all. These are people involved in researching the phenomena.
Well, that, and there's also a lot of, I believe. There's a lot of misinformation people that are purposely put out there in the public just to spread misinformation, to keep us kind of out of the loop of what really might be going on. It's kind of like the magician act, you know what I mean? Misdirection.
Yes, I agree with you, and because I tend to see it as keeping the cauldron boiling,
right,
simmering away. You know as well as I do that specifically, if there are a number of sightings of UFOs, that there will be additional sightings involving some outlandish claims and allegations. But of course, most people would then not believe any of it at all. This is the sad part about all of this, is that. I mean, we can see the wood for the trees. Other people don't seem to be interested at all, but the facts do speak for themselves, and the evidence speaks for itself. You talk about Roswell, and the evidence there. If this went before a court, you know what the verdict would be. But unfortunately, it is still. It is still in the main ignored, but how can you ignore such a fantastic phenomena? And as I think your colleague might have said, he is skeptical of some things. Well,
yeah, absolutely.
Even if you're a skeptic, even if you don't believe in UFOs, which is a pretty bizarre thing to say now, but if you don't believe in them at all, what you have to admit is that it is the greatest phenomena of all modern day times, because of the fact that so many people worldwide, for a very long time now, have reported similar experiences. And of course, one thing I have observed with UFOs is that the behavior characteristics of UFOs doesn't really alter at all, and that basically there are 2 or 3 categories in which they fit into, but their behavior doesn't change at all. You know, I think that man is poised on the brink of something pretty fantastic, but chooses to stick his, chooses to not to want to know. So.
You know, it's funny you say that, but remember when we were talking earlier, John, I brought up the story with my one of my bosses. It's funny. I think there is that conditioning. I was telling you earlier tonight that there's that conditioning happening already, and more people are accepting of the whole phenomenon. But you know, with all your research, do you, and I ask a lot of people that I have on the show here to ask this question, do you think 100% that everything that people are seeing is alien related or extraterrestrial, or is that there a possibility that a lot of the stuff we're seeing in the skies are our own back engineered stuff from maybe something that just crashed at Roswell? We haven't had as much activity as people might think. What do you think is really going on with the whole phenomenon?
Well, first of all, sightings of UFOs obviously go back many years, and I have sightings of triangular objects by pilots in 1940 and sightings of triangular objects in 1910. So what you got to understand is that long before man was able to conquer the skies and get up in an aeroplane, these things were being seen then. So that negates to a great degree the back engineering stuff. But although obviously as time's gone on, some of these things could be, not only back engineered, but covert aircraft. But you can't remove the fact that, as I say, I mean, I've looked back into the 13th century, and you're talking specifically not about fireballs or bolides or meteorites. You're talking about, you see, out of all the thousands I've looked at, predominantly, why is it that the majority of these sightings will involve 3 objects? Now, I believe that the 3 objects are in fact one. I have a leaning towards, Trevor J. Constable's theories about, space critters and these things being intelligent macrobiological organisms. That's my. I mean, I can't prove any of this or disprove it, but
hang on. I got to ask you here. You're telling me that the triangles, for example, that are 3 in 1, are also organic?
No, I'm saying that some of them certainly appear to be organic. I mean, are you familiar with Trevor J. Constable's work?
Not really, but I'd love to be briefly educated on it.
I mean, he's a very clever guy. He's produced a number of books, and I think that you have to, it's the same old story that certainly was with me, that when I first started this, I thought everything was alien. I thought these were extraterrestrials or these were interdimensional, and so many people have so many theories, and the truth of the matter is, I can't prove or disprove. Perhaps my job as if you like, as a UFO historian, is to preserve it. But as you go along that particular journey, you speak to so many people who've had some fantastic experiences. You speak to people who've been threatened. I mean, we talked about the Men in Black, but I don't know if these are Men in Black or government departments. But the statistics are there. People sometimes are really frightened by this stuff.
Well, the whole Men in Black phenomenon, I could sum up to maybe people getting visited by some federal agents like the FBI or something like that. They dress in black suits, I don't know if there's much to the whole Men in Black phenomenon, but let me ask you, what do you feel about Foo Fighters? Do you think that's where this whole phenomenon kind of started from?
Well, I don't think it started then, because I've spoken to quite a lot of pilots, on some in the States and a lot in England, that have seen what they describe as, they're not always globular objects. Some of them were triangular objects.
Right. Cigar-shaped objects also.
Yeah, and things shaped like Christmas trees. Well, what shape is a Christmas tree? Triangular. And I've come across pilots that have shot at them and seen them crash onto the ground. And, these some of the stories from these guys are really peculiar. But, if you think about the Foo Fighters, and then you think about the ghost rockets 1946 over Sweden and Finland, and then you think about the green the green UFOs and fireballs that were seen over America in 48 and 49. You put all this together, sometimes you get an impression that basically we're talking about the same thing.
Well, here something really peculiar happened in the 40s. Of course, we had the Second World War that we ended with. We won, we beat Hitler and all that stuff, and then we had 1947, the Roswell crash. Right after that, then the UFO phenomenon seemed to really explode in movies. There's actually a movie called The Flying Saucer that came out in 1950, and it became really popular. These UFO films.
But hold on, a lot of them were the schlock B movie stuff.
Right,
they were trying to play off.
You got to start somewhere, Alan.
Still
start somewhere. You got to start somewhere. But the point I'm trying to make here, it seems that it really all started coming to that direction where UFOs became more and more popular, that even mainstream and movies started getting made after Roswell. Roswell was really what kind of like sparked that interest. But it's been amazing how since Hollywood has really jumped on that bandwagon, sightings have gone up through the roof. Abduction scenarios have gone up through the roof. Even like the way people see aliens, for example. The little grays weren't described ever until the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when they were seen there. And then everybody's like, "Oh yeah, grays, they abduct us."
Wait a minute. How much? You're telling me that there are no records of anyone else describing a gray till after Spielberg did Close Encounters?
I can't remember one case clear that.
I was just going to say, I think that you would find those, but of course, the thing about UFOs is that...
Hang on. I'm sorry for interrupting. When was it that Travis was abducted?
That happened in 75, I think it was.
Okay, that's...
But the aliens he saw weren't your traditional grays. He said he saw humanoids, Nordics, all kinds of different things.
And tall grays and short grays. He mentioned short grays as well, too. And we both know that we could call Travis and ask him that question. Also, what about Betty and Barney? What about Betty and Barney Hill, who were abducted in the 60s? That also described the grays.
That's true.
They also described grays. So don't tell me
but it didn't become popular until the film came out. Then everybody was seeing grays. Well, Communion came out, then everybody was seeing grays.
Well, that's because
what I'm trying to get.
That's because the aliens watched the movie and shape changed.
That could happen. Yes.
But we were picking up stories like this back in the 40s where people wouldn't have referred to the greys at all, would they? You see, they would have referred...
Little green men.
Yeah, we've identified these things now. We've labelled them. But of course, back in Victorian times, well, how could you say that you saw a UFO or a flying saucer, an alien abduction or whatever? You couldn't, because that terminology, didn't exist in Victorian times. So you would find...
I disagree with that. I'm sorry, I got to disagree with that because, how many times in Victorian times have they referred to seeing things like Ezekiel's wheel, which is wheels upon wheels in the sky?
Yeah, I agree, but I said that they did not refer, that phraseology was not in existence as far as the word UFO or flying saucers.
No. But
that is true though. That is true. They weren't referred to as flying saucers.
That's right. Yeah, I mean,
they didn't have that terminology back then. That's why, and that's actually been part of my thinking for a long time now. That a lot of the mythology has been shaped throughout biblical, and it has been misidentified UFOs, and they didn't know how to identify it, so they called it Ezekiel's wheel. For example.
Well, I don't think it was misidentified. I think actually it might have been purposely edited by the kings and queens.
That could be
as
also.
well as the monks in the monasteries duplicating the books.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, everybody's, I'm sorry to interject here, but everyone says is like, oh my God, the New Testament is the Word of God. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but how many times have kings and queens re-edited and abridged and took certain chapters out of the King James just to make it politically correct to control the masses in the Middle Ages?
Yeah. To me, listening here and
sorry, I went on a rant there. I apologize.
No, I'm just wondering which is the bad cop and the good cop here. But
a little bit of both. Just like
I try to be the good cop as much as possible.
You're the nice guy.
No. It's not that I'm not arguing the facts. I'm just saying I think the facts may be misinterpreted. I think it might have been misread, and I think everybody's entitled to an opinion, but the truth is still going to be the truth.
Unless you watch Star Wars, then you figure out that the truth could be seen from several point of views.
I must mention that. I did contact. Of course, Lord Dowding was head of RAF Fighter Command in the Second World War, and he actually went to Washington and met with the president and discussed the flying saucer problem, as I'm sure many others did.
Got a question. Was there a version in the UK? Was there a version of Area 51 in the UK?
That's a good question.
There are.
If you told us you have to kill us, I mean, you're like bouncing.
I don't know. I actually went to Rachel some years ago. Went to Vegas. Vegas, a fascinating place. But
Vegas.
I went to Las Vegas, and
that's not in the UK.
No.
Nope. No, but what happens in Vegas does stay in Vegas.
It's like we're suddenly talking about. Well, is there anything like Area 51 in the UK? It's like, well, I went to Vegas.
Let the man finish, Alan. Hold on.
I must say that when I went to, I can never forget finally ending up at Rachel, 12 o'clock at night, and having the hottest rum and coke I've ever had in my life. But that was a magical place. And
was it shaken, not stirred, rum and coke?
Yeah, shaken and not stirred. And but the first thing I did was look under the bed, because I people tell me about these huge, great spiders out there, but they weren't, and it was a very pleasurable visit. And the oddest thing of all, and I've not told many people this, is that when we went to Vegas. I'm just trying to think. I think what's that Grecian place where the lava comes up? I can't remember the name of the place now, but
Caesar's Palace.
Yeah, just past the bell.
The Eiffel Tower.
Yeah, it's incredible. But about 11 o'clock at night, and I've got this on film. This red light dropped out of the sky and wandered over the top of the buildings and then back onto the streets, quite a large red light, and then disappeared into the sky. And I wouldn't have believed it until I'd seen it. And I've not even looked at the film I took, and that's 7 years ago. So if that sounds bizarre, the whole subject is bizarre. So,
but of course... you have it on film, but you haven't looked at it since?
Yeah, that's right. And I also filmed an object outside my window in 1995, which is another story, and I have looked at that, and that is, again, strange things.
Okay, so are you going to give us the exclusive now to let us air this next week or sometime even later on?
Find it first.
Well, we're going to make you find it. We want to air this.
You're being bad cop now.
No. I'm not, mate. I'm not being bad cop at all. I'm just saying it's like you have it on film, yet you've never reviewed it since.
That's how it works. Yeah. That's right.
Wow.
Probably because at the time I thought that it wasn't that significant. It's only in the years that have elapsed, and I thought I must have a look at it, and because it was just bizarre. But of course, I suppose bizarre is the name of the game.
Well, that's kind of where we get into here, John.
Yeah, this is the bizarre. I mean, I just want to one-up the MUFON Turkey guys. I want to make sure. I want to show a legitimate, video.
Speaking of which, John, let's get back into some real conversation here.
Oh, none of this was real. Thank you very much.
How much, speaking of legit video, how much do you think of the stuff that we actually get on the internet nowadays is legit, considering how easy it is to fake some of this stuff?
Well, you're right. I think a lot of it is fabricated and manipulated, and there's so much software you can use. I generally are pretty wary of this stuff. Some years ago, there was a very good sighting down in Cornwall where somebody had taken a clip of film of a UFO, and I contacted them. They were willing to let me look at that, but the UFO researcher banned me from having a look at it, and he said he hadn't finished his inquiries, which was fair enough. But then I found out that he'd put fake UFO footage on the internet. Well, I'm sorry. As far as I'm concerned, that's tainted, and I want nothing to do with it. So, that was. I just don't get involved with it. At the end of the day, I have so much material here which I've accumulated that much of it after 1989 I haven't looked at yet, but I faithfully recorded everything that we people that we've interviewed and our research going back all these years. But I would like to say that the oddest thing is that, and I'm sure it's different over there, but when we produced Volume 1, which was 1940 to 59 of Haunted Skies, just prior to that, the local BBC radio stations and one or two of the TV stations had in fact asked me to talk about the subject, about my intended books. And as soon as the book was out, nothing. We've had nothing since. We had some of the nationals asked for copies of the book and promised to do a review, and it's all been blocked since, which is pretty. That's
odd.
No, it's not actually. You figure that most of the evidence figure it this way: most of the evidence that he's putting in the book is so credible that they can't debunk it, which is why they don't want to put it out to the masses.
Correct.
I agree, and I do say to people. In fact, one lady rang me up because every few years it's finished now, but every few years they used to declassify the records over here,
right?
And if you want to trawl through, which I have done through,
well, is that Nick Redfern or Nick Pope that does that?
Well, Nick Pope.
Nick Pope.
Nick Pope.
He hasn't been on our desk for some years, but my argument would be that all I ask people to do, as I said to this journalist, because she said, well, what difference are your books to the information that's been declassified? And with all due respect, it is the biggest load of rubbish I've ever read in my life that's been declassified. I think it was Robert Hastings said that it's low-grade material, which it is, and most of it relates to letters from people wanting to be part of the UFO brigade and have a trip to the spaceship. Really, but to put it bluntly, it's a load of crap. But that's how it's worked for many years here. And I'm sure you're right when you say that's one of the reasons why they want everything to do with me, because it's very difficult to disprove. Okay,
your work is too credible, plain and simple.
Right.
Well, that's the problem, isn't it? It's a double-edged sword. But I'd rather it too credible than incredible, because because occasionally people over here, that the newspapers, they will write an article, particularly the nationals, and it will be about spooky ghosts and flying saucers and the Loch Ness monster, and it'll be just actually disinformation.
There hasn't been many waves made on finding the Loch Ness monster either, huh?
Well, we haven't found him yet. No.
Last time I spoke to Mr. Pope. By the way, he's a great guy.
Yeah, real easy to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, I love talking to him. He's a great person to interview. But last time we spoke, I told him, what do you think? Honestly, do you think that they are actually giving you all the files and all the information? I mean, how much do you think they really gave him, and how much do you think it's still, or how much do you think they've released? I should say, not just him, but how much they've actually released of the files, and how much do you think they still have that they're not putting out?
Well, I'm not sure.
I'm talking directly about the Ministry of Defense here. I'm talking directly about their files.
Well,
Not trying to single them out at all, no.
No, not at all.
well, with all due respect to Nick, he's done the foreword for the next volume. I mean, he, as you say, he's a smashing bloke. I have a lot of time for him, but but I don't think that he was privy to, if you like, to the amount of information that is contained in our books, but that's possibly due to the fact that a lot of our information wasn't reported to the MOD.
Right.
And I did speak to Nick. I speak to him regularly, but on the last batch of declassified files, there was a report of a chap that'd seen a UFO. And this was followed by the fall of some fibrous material. That could be what people classify as angel hair. Anyway, This guy put it in a jam jar. And I said to Nick, well, would somebody from the MOD have followed the investigation and picked up that sample and had it tested or whatever? And Nick promised me that, contrary to public opinion about matters such as this, well, of course, somebody would have come out and picked it up. Because why not? I mean, that's the residue. But we have pieces of metal and all sorts of things that have come from UFOs, which again is another story. And a very, very pleasant man called Nick Wrighty in the States has been helping us with some of this material. But as I say, I don't think that I think at the end of the day, if these files are regarded important enough, they won't be released. And on occasion, I'm still waiting for a 1971 file to be released, of which I've investigated. And I've been promised that would be released to me 10 years ago. And of course, it probably doesn't exist. So.
Yeah, that was exactly my sentiments with Nick Pope. By the way, we're joined with James Swagger. He's on the line with us. James, my friend, how are you doing?
Hey guys, great to be on the show. Thanks for taking the call.
Great to have you. Here he is, John Hanson, James Swagger. You're both on the line.
Hi, James. We have spoken before.
Yeah, I got confused because the name on the book's different. The name on the book is John Dawn, and I wasn't sure it was the same guy. But it's a pleasure to talk to you again, John. Just want to talk about Rendlesham Forest. Have you looked into Rendlesham Forest? What's your verdict on that? Or
well, we have written up, in our volume 8 of Horns of Skies, we've addressed the Zygmunt Adamski case, the guy that was on a cold tip, which people alleged was as a result of the aliens dropping him from a flying saucer. And in actual fact, that is a load of unadulterated rubbish, because that particular gentleman was abducted by somebody whose name I can't give on air. And I'm quite satisfied that was the case. And with matters such as that, where people will blame a UFO when it's nothing to do with the UFO, obviously one would work as diligently to if you like, to clear the name. So we've covered that and quite a lot of interesting information, and the Alan Godfrey case and some other incidents. But half of the book is devoted to the Rendlesham Forest incident, of which I know very well, because I've spent enough years researching into it, thanks to Brenda Butler. Do you know Brenda, James?
No, I'm not familiar with Brenda Butler.
Well, she wrote Sky Crash back in 1983 with Dot Street and Jenny Randalls. And in fact, the first person to know of the UFO landing was a guy called Chris Pennington. And Chris Pennington was Brenda Butler's partner. And he was
Yes.
By one of the guys from the base called Steve Roberts. Well, I know who Steve Roberts is, and I've written to Steve. And what I've done, with cases like this, you not only got to look underneath and over the top, you've got to look at everything, and that's what I have done, and certainly put the record straight. But A lot of people believe that in actual fact it was a Russian satellite. And in 1986, a lady called Karen, who I've referred to as a whistleblower, I don't know her real name, but she was working at RAF Woodbridge. He was a secretary there, and I've got to be blunt here and say there's little doubt that she purloined some documents and photographs, and she suggested that the UFO explanation was a camouflage to cover the fact that they'd got a Russian satellite or a Russian aircraft, and all of these things sound pretty crazy. But other people have talked about the object having landed and needed repairing, and that. But I've checked all of this out, and that's in volume 8. And as I say, Charles Holt was very helpful, but some questions he didn't answer, which was his prerogative. But you've got to remember with these guys, these Air Force guys, that they did sign official secrets, and this is for life for some of them, isn't it?
Yeah, true, but true.
So,
wait a minute, there's no expiration on the Official Secrets Act in the UK?
Well, I think it's 30 years, but, I'm ashamed to say I don't know what the situation is.
It's actually both, John. I think it's 30 and 50. They can extend it to 50 because I think Churchill did something with the Foo Fighters and he put a 50-year ban on that. And there's another case of not a UFO case. Some scientists went to Tibet and researched something with the monks, and they put a 50-year ban on his research over there, whatever he found out.
Yeah, that's what we're up against, aren't we? Unfortunately, we are a breed of people that clamour for an answer and try and attack authority to get these answers. And unfortunately, obviously they don't want us to know. And of course, as I've mentioned before to people, it is the greatest phenomenon of modern day times. And even if you're a skeptic, you can't disregard all of these thousands upon thousands of people worldwide that have had these experiences. And I suppose at the end of the day, I feel for these people because they.
What about ancient aliens, John? Do you look into the really deep antiquity of this phenomenon?
Well, you're talking about sightings going back many years then.
Going back into
thousands of years.
Von Daniken. Well, sorry. Yeah, undoubtedly. But I believe that ultimately, how much information there is. Let me say there are similarities between modern day UFO sightings and experiences and some things that you read about in the Bible, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Bible contains UFO experiences. But
Old Testament wise, there are things that could be read in. Well, the Nephilim, and then the pillar of fire that traveled in the desert with, the Exodus, Ezekiel's wheel. There's enough things that could correlate to it. Absolutely, 100%.
Well, there are,
The Sanskrit writings. The Sanskrit writings as well with the Vimanas and.
Oh the Bhagavad Gita. Absolutely. There are parts of the earth that are so scorched. What's the proper term for it? In India, where there's basically what would be the result of a nuclear blast, just no isotope leftovers. What are both your opinions on, besides Von Daniken, Sitchin stuff as well too?
I call people who follow Sitchin Sitchinites.
I have no idea what you're
I call them lunatics myself, but that's a different story.
I tell you what, right, and the thing is, I actually have researched cylinder seals. I wrote a master's in, most people don't know that about me, but I did a master's in mechanical engineering, and science and engineering is mostly what I did most of my career, but I did a master's of research science and society, and I used the cylinder seals for both my master's degree. One end of it, I studied the mechanical engineering of them, and how they formed them, and it's a really high technology used to do it. They carved like 7 on the Mohs scale stones that were 7, 8, 9 out of 10. And they carved 3D images in reverse embossed around a cylinder. Extremely hard to do. If we had machines, we would find it hard to do today. You can't even see the image until you roll it into clay on some of them. So that's why I studied mechanical engineering. But I also studied the context and the culture of the Sumerians. So I'm well versed in that. Now, I will say a lot of what Sitchin says can't be backed up. But
correct.
I'm open, a lot of it. Now, a lot of it can, but the bits of it that can be backed up isn't the juicy details.
Right. But, well, have you looked into the work of Michael Heiser at all?
Yeah, I have too. I just will say, I will say on Sitchin though, and I don't want to hijack the call, but I will say on Sitchin that he did have access to private archives. J.P. Morgan, I've got books of J.P. Morgan. Not that J.P. Morgan ever wrote his own book, but he has his own collection of cylinder seals, as does many wealthy billionaires. Most of the cylinder seals and these tablets are in private collections around the world. A lot of them, there's 250,000 of them sitting in Sweden, untranslated to still today, because there's only a handful of people that can translate it. So the point is, a lot of this stuff is in private collections, and because he wasn't able to produce the documents, doesn't mean that they didn't exist. But some of it, I think he embellished the truth a little bit.
Definitely. No, in fact, Michael Heiser says that, not embellished, Michael Heiser was saying that he straight up lies in a lot of the things, and he invented certain things. And when you look at the Hebrew language of certain meanings of words, that he kind of manipulated the meaning and, just changed certain things. I mean, it's a fascinating documentary. If anybody
Michael Heiser did a good job and a very
he did a fantastic job, yeah.
And if it wasn't for Michael Heiser's work, we would all think that Sitchin was this genius child. But so that's good that we have people like that, and it really is. But I mean, I don't think Sitchin fabricating some stuff will deny what's gone on in our ancient times either. I do think.
Oh no, definitely not. I mean, there's precedent for there haven't been contact many hundreds and maybe thousands of years ago. There is some evidence in the Bible, for example, like we said earlier. There's evidence in cave wall art and all kinds of stuff that we found. So is there something there? Yeah, I do believe there might be something there. Sitchin just went about it his own way and did his own thing and made up his own storyline.
In my part of the world, where all the megaliths are and what I write about and stuff, in Sligo in the northwest of Ireland, they talk about this, the Tuatha De Danann, these mystery people that built these megaliths with all this high technology of advanced astronomy and all the megaliths here that came to Ireland, came on a dark cloud and landed on a mountain. That's what the Irish Gaelic texts dated to 7th century AD. And not just one source. It's been backed up with several different books. There's the Book of Invasions and the Book of Leinster. And they both actually describe the same story, but in two different accounts in slightly different ways. Slightly, different, but for the better part, mostly all the same. But they all talk about these mystery people, these tall, beautiful-looking, blonde-looking people coming in on a dark cloud. Bizarre, like.
Sounds a lot like what Travis saw, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm just going to say, if I can just get in, we talked about Rendlesham Forest, but there has been an awful lot of, some people might judge it as paranormal phenomena, which is ongoing and has been taking place for many years there now. And I always say that during my early visits to the forest, this was in 1997, 1998, and I used to go there probably 6 or 7 times a year, that people would tell me about some of these globes of light that they saw flying up the tracks, and I always used to take it with a pinch of salt, to be honest, but I have seen those, and then people make me laugh when they talk about orbs, and they actually...
Wait. I'm sorry, you're telling me you're seeing orbs of light on railroad tracks?
I have, yeah. On the tracks, did you say railroad tracks?
Yes.
Oh, no, not railroad tracks, no, on the tracks. Sorry, these are the footpaths, that might be on the footpaths that lead through the forest.
Okay. All right.
I have seen them. And
Sorry, John. He's from America. Different terminologies.
You mean
we're on the right.
It's lost in translation. Sorry about that.
Correct. Yeah, he's lost in translation.
Because I was going to say, do they? There's something called the Marfa-lights in the States that are orbs of light that are seen on tracks, train
I've heard
tracks,
of those, yeah.
as well as the paths along walking paths.
These could be, but some of the mists that are photographed there, and some of the very strange images, you can, I suppose, at the end of the day, you could argue unsuccessfully that these represent some paranormal species or something, but the real evidence, and obviously I'd like your opinion here, is that on a number of occasions we have in fact had the fall of stones. And these are hot stones, and they're not falling from the sky. They're levitated from somewhere else in the forest, and they drop next to you. Now, I've no idea. People have tried to tell me that these are birds flying at night with hot stones in their beaks, or that they are children playing us up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And, I have experienced that. I've got the stones, and I did have I've got a friend in the family who's a scientist, and she examined some of these stones, and she said they are identical to the sort of stones you would find anywhere, except for the fact that that they're not weathered, they're not aged, that they haven't got the, if you go and pick a stone up, sometimes with these stones they've got cracks or they've got some debris on them, but these were clean. So I have no idea, but these were hot stones. I photographed them, and I know plenty of people have picked them up, as I say, recovered them. But I also investigated a case in Birmingham where, over a duration of 2.5 years, 3 houses in a place called Washwood Heath in Birmingham endured the fall of stones. And, they had police staked the place out with surveillance. They had the army move in. They could not find, and oddly, Sir Arthur Clarke, C. Clarke, came over and sent, well, he actually didn't come over himself, but he sent a film crew, and they took some film in the daylight and made it quite dark to look like night, so I was told. But the long and the short of this tale is that the lady in the middle that was getting all the stones, most of them, her back garden had been laid with some flagstones that were actually that they'd come from a church. They were they were paving stones from a church, and some of them obviously come from graves and things. And I don't know if there's a connection there, but they've stopped falling now. But so I don't know. But if you look into ports, APPS around the world, you will find there has been quite a lot of cases, and in the States, where police officers have been pelted with them, and
well, there could be all kind of random reasons why police officers are stoned.
Pelted with stones.
I wanted to actually ask John here, because we kind of spoke about this off air, and I wanted to bring it up on air because I wanted to see what his thoughts are on this, and I wanted to expand on what me and him spoke about earlier. John, I wanted to ask you about the inner Earth and the possibility of a lot of these crafts coming from the inner Earth. Is that at all something that you've, through your research, have come across as a possibility, and how much would you think that could be actually the answer?
Well, when you say inner Earth, I suppose you mean physically inner Earth. And when
I'm not talking about a hollow Earth. I'm talking about pockets within the Earth, because a lot of UFOs are seen coming out of the ocean.
I think we both felt that certainly this phenomena is indigenous to the planet. And rather than the incursions of an extraterrestrial species that sometimes bizarrely come all this distance and then fail to negotiate the last 6 feet of Earth and crash land, if you believe what some people tell. But, as I say, it's something that's here. The interesting thing about this is whether it's I mean, it has been here for a long time, in my opinion. I think most people agree that UFO sightings can go back probably thousands of years. But the $64 million question is it an integral part of the Earth necessary to for man to continue living on it, or was it something that was seeded on the planet, or is it necessary to fascinating questions about this phenomena. I mean, I always remember that. Dr. Alan Hynek, after all, he started off as a skeptic, but he ended up believing, and in fact, he said that this is not an extraterrestrial phenomenon at all. It is more likely to be a paranormal phenomenon. Now, sometimes I wonder if there's any difference between the one and the other. Anything in the air is UFO. Anything on the ground is paranormal. Right.
Well, I would pose the question out there that if maybe it's not paranormal, but maybe it might be another tangent species that we're not truly aware of, that might live in what you would call the Hollow Earth, or they're USOs. I mean, I remember the movie The Abyss, where we can't reach the depths that there are enough other species that can survive and even thrive.
Right.
On below the earth, below the Earth's crust that we have access to, and there's so much of this planet that is still yet to be explored. Could it be just a species that just has a tangent from us, or maybe a totally different direction? And maybe reptilians did evolve not just in maybe reptiles didn't just evolve into birds, but they evolved into a sentient, self-aware and technologically capable species of some type.
You could also take into consideration the fact that prior to man's development on the planet, that there was an indigenous species, or there still is a species that lived on this planet, and they facilitated their movement across the skies in saucer-shaped objects, and most of the time they were. Are you still there?
Yeah,
hello.
Yeah, well,
sorry.
I've got
stickers. I've got a sticker from you saying somebody's echoing a bit. I don't know who that is. It's probably from one of your masters. But as
Continue.
Well, I'll because I don't want another sticker like that, because I'll expect a cane across my back. Yeah, but that's the thing is, we're the original descendants of this planet, invisible denizens, for want of a better word.
I'm sorry, I can't understand the grammatic statement of original descendants.
Well, the people that actually probably may well have more claim to this planet than us. I mean, a lot of people believe, of course, that we are the aliens. I think, I don't know whether we are or we aren't, but this indigenous race, I believe, still lives here, and that we, in the 21st century, we refer to it as flying saucers, aliens, abductions, and all this other stuff. But at the end of the day...
John, real quick, not to cut you off, John, real quick, the Travis Walton case, one thing about that case that always fascinated me after reading the book was the fact that he did see Nordic-looking,
that's
white
right.
people on the ship. I've always wondered, could it be that mankind, human beings, for example, we're all here on this planet, but that we all came from different parts of our own solar system. And that would possibly explain maybe the different variations of people on the planet somehow. Of course, there's been mixing of the races and stuff over millennia. But
so what you're saying is one seed race, and there's all sorts of deviations and variants from it.
Well, it appears so, doesn't it? Because I do have a number of accounts where people have seen at close range UFOs with occupants, and do have, sometimes there are mixed occupants inside, and you referred to them as various guises, and these we're not talking about an apparent one individual race. We're talking about a number of people, including the Nordics, and
right.
so many reports about them. Yeah.
Well, I got a question about that. If I can throw that out into the mix here, all the aliens that we've seen inside and actually outside spaceships, where they're standing on the Earth, that without any breathing apparatus, without any additional hardware exoskeleton.
Well, we're assuming they don't have anything on. I mean, if you saw the movie Fire in the Sky, now Fire in the Sky, obviously they embellished the truth, but there is one scene in that movie where I was like, that's brilliant, when Travis is on the ship and he's looking at the space suits that the aliens wore, and they look like the traditional grays with the bugged out eyes that everybody sees.
Right.
What if what everybody's seeing is a being inside of a suit, and when he takes the suit off, it looks like a gray, but a little bit different.
Okay, so you're telling me like the Nordic mass, they must have a Nordic skin that they throw on. I mean, my whole thing, what the question I'm trying to get to is all these people that have encounters with species that don't seem to have any breathing apparatus, like the Nordics, the reptoids. Here's the thing. Even the Nordics in Travis's story had a breathing apparatus over their head. Okay, my whole question is it? I find it statistically impossible that every single race that we've encountered was in our version of the Goldilocks zone, is where they evolved if they were coming from off-world. Do you understand where I'm going with that?
I think
John.
I know this Darwinian evolution has no idea and no conclusion or no proof.
Darwinian evolution is still a theory.
Well, yeah, but
just like
as applied to the races on our planet, they have no idea whatsoever how
the variations, the
Africans or the Asian or
Caucasian, Asians, Africans. Yeah, I mean, how is it that there's such a drastic variation in the races on this planet?
I don't know,
and it is drastic. It is drastic.
Oh, absolutely. What about this woman who said that she found the genetic evidence like 4 or 6 months ago that humanity came about when a pig mated with a monkey, and we're the offspring. If you
notice the awkward silence that followed that.
Well, you Google it. You think I'm joking? She says she actually.
No, I know you're not joking. My concern is that she actually said that.
Well, you and I, Jack, had this conversation, if you remember, a couple of months back. That what the hell was this woman thinking?
Exactly, and I still ask that question. What the hell was she thinking?
Well, we still can't find the missing link between Homo erectus and Homo sapien, where we are now, and who knows what the next thing is going to be. By the way, speaking of the next thing, they're doing Heroes, the TV show Rebirth, coming out in 2015, which was supposed to be the next evolution in humanity. But my question really goes back to boiling it down, and I'm sorry for interrupting all this, but I'm trying to understand that the way this whole conversation is going, since you brought it about, is that the other things, the other species, the other beings that we're seeing could quite possibly be in, whether you call it the Hollow Earth or these pockets of civilization that we don't have access to, is, to me, actually more likely, or at least some of it is more likely, than everybody visiting us from off-world. And the reason I say that is those that we see that are not in any type of a breathing apparatus or some type of a pressure suit must have evolved in a near identical Goldilocks
environment.
Zone. Exactly. And statistically, then they're the ability to have that many planets that we at least that are anywhere.
Actually, hold on. Statistically speaking, we're finding more and more planets on a daily basis. By the way,
we're finding planets, but how many are in the Goldilocks zone?
A lot of them are actually. A lot of them we are finding are in a Goldilocks type zone. And here's the thing, Alan. That's what they're telling us they're finding. That's, I go back to the whole NASA never gives a straight answer. They might know a whole lot of things that they're not telling us. So they might have found thousands and thousands of planets that they can already classify as planets with life on them, but they just, we're not telling anybody. They're just keeping it from us. So that could be a possibility also. But look, NASA, I think recently has come and admitted that looking for life in the Goldilocks zone alone is not a great idea, because life could evolve in all different forms in all kinds of different areas. In fact, there could be life, like we said, in places on the Earth that you would not expect there to be life, but life still finds a way to happen and to evolve and thrive. That, I think, we're going to find all over the cosmos. In fact, I believe that when disclosure starts to really become a reality, we're going to find that there's actually a lot more life within our own solar system than we even imagined. John, what do you think about that?
Well, I agree with you, and I think that there is an awful lot that's kept from us. That is fairly obvious, and that ultimately one day, perhaps as we explained before or discussed before, I think that whatever it is far more shocking than we could ever realise. And one gets an impression that the authorities are trying to protect us in some way, the nanny state. But I believe that we should know, because we have the right to know. But of course there is an awful lot kept from us, and as you said, maybe this planet's been found, but this is kept from us because the last thing they want to do is destabilize any infrastructure, and this is of course why disclosure won't take place for many years.
Yeah, I think we kind of agreed that it'll probably be way after our lifetime. When we spoke earlier today.
I agree, but some people, of course, are optimistic, and there's nothing wrong with that. Feel that it's about to happen. But I've always said that in the 1950s, and the 60s, and the 70s, and the 80s, I mean, there was huge waves of activity, not only in the States, but in France. But as time goes by, of course, all those sightings slowly erode and people pass away and reports are destroyed. And then all you have is just the bare statistics, which mean nothing. And so, going back to what I said before, it has to be documented. Because it's our right to know. And in a way, it's not about us now, is it? It's about when we're not here, 50, 60, 70 years time when we're not here. This should be recorded.
I completely agree, but what would be the worst thing not to cut you off, but it would be the worst case scenario let's say we don't have another Roswell, we don't have another Rendlesham Forest, we don't have another big event in the next 50, 60 years, and it becomes like status quo that nothing happens from here to the next 100 years. And a lot of the people that have been involved in the big cases over the last 50 years do, of course, pass away. That happens to we all pass away, people. That's sadly what happens. We all die. In fact, you spend more time dead on this planet than you do alive. Put that in the back of your mind for a second and think about that. But, once everybody involved in ufology now does pass away, say nothing happens from here to another 100 years, there could be that chance that people generally would not care or even forget about the subject. So you're absolutely right. Documenting everything that happens now is the only bridge to the future in case what they want, and I'm talking about the New World Order, the Illuminati, whoever they are that is running the whole show, if they get their way and they wipe out any future events from happening and they don't give us disclosure, it is possible that everything could just kind of be forgotten, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I often wonder if we're going to see waves of activity once again in the 21st century, starting in 1947, because if you look back at the 20th century, okay, there are a number of reports, but nothing like, it all started in 1947, which because some people think that 1947 atomic bomb explosions and all this sort of stuff has sparked it off. But of course, sightings do go back into history.
Further, yep.
But maybe those prolific waves of activity will start in 1947. and 67, 77, 78, 80, and 95. But I do believe that they've actually tailed off as such. That's my impression, and that we don't get too many reports of close encounters anymore or landed objects. But of course, I may be wrong with that. But that is my impression at the moment. But things will change because they always will.
And well, how much do you think of the reports in the 80s were authentic? Like, for example, speaking of close encounters, Communion by Whitley Strieber. Do you think his encounter or his experience was authentic?
I do, yeah, because some of the experiences that people have given to me, and I've interviewed quite a number, similar experiences, and some of these things are quite frightening, and I mean, it doesn't matter sometimes how bizarre, how incredible, how ridiculous these experiences are. What always stands out is the genuineness of the UFO witness, and of course, we're also talking about pilots and senior RAF and United States Air Force pilots. And I was saying that,
astronauts also.
Oh, well, astronauts, Well, look, Edgar Mitchell, he's had the guts to come forward, and Robert Hellier from Canada. But, of course, so many have done, but it doesn't seem to dent the establishment, does it? It doesn't seem... That's the disparaging thing about it all.
Hey, John, wasn't there a case, the pilot from Guernsey or Jersey, I can't remember which of the Channel Islands, he was going across...
the cigar-shaped thing. Bowers, was it? Mr. Bowers?
Yeah. Wow, that was a fascinating tale he had.
It was, but if I can say that I have 1,000 like that, I mean, I've got so many cases, and I've no idea how I've ended up with all of this stuff, because when I first started out, I had little, but unfortunately or fortunately, I do have a massive amount, and I've always said that it doesn't matter what it is, it has to be documented, and that's what I suppose what I've done, and it isn't about me. It's about future generations. The thing is, at least it keeps me out of trouble. UFOs,
or it gets you in a whole different kind of trouble, John.
Not so much now. There are stories I cannot tell.
Well, let me ask you, Abby, would you like to experience going on a ride if aliens came down and visited? Would you be open for that close encounter?
Well, I suppose, would I have any choice? That's the thing.
Probably not.
Probably not. No. I mean, I just have to say that before I forget, one particular, I did have a sighting in 1996, and I was with my son Keith, and June, whatever it is, it's all recorded. And we were stood having a drink, and we'd had one pint. And if you can imagine, it was a dark night, and the stars were out. It was a clear night, and you'd got a solitary satellite wandering over as they do, and then you've got an aircraft going in, and all of a sudden, from the northern horizon to the southern horizon, and in a celestial arc, appeared two huge objects, sharply defined, if you can, bolted together is the only expression, side by side, and they rose up from the northern hemisphere and over into the southern hemisphere in 3 seconds. Now, at some stage, I'm sure that depending on the distance involved and the 3 seconds, these were huge things. They were as big as dustbin lids in the sky compared to a pinprick of a satellite. Now, I saw them go over, and at the time, I thought, this is fantastic. What on earth could they be? And a little bit embarrassing when you have a UFO sighting like that, because you don't know what to tell people, but somebody suggested it was the Mir space station refueling, which of course is a load of rubbish. But subsequently since then, I've encountered many similar stories. The problem is, like yourself, I don't know what they are, where they come from. The only thing I do know is that their peculiarities of behavior will continue to do so as they always have done.
Now, how much of sightings could be attributed to, like, say, for example, especially in the last 30 years, to, like, space debris falling into Earth orbit?
Well, of course, I've also covered those incidents, and one would obviously speculate that on those occasions, yeah, absolutely, space debris or fireballs or bolides. I remember years ago, I went to see a young man and his mother, and he said to me, he was quite frightened. He said he walked outside one night, and all of a sudden the sky was dark, and all of a sudden the sky was blue. Everywhere lit up with a blue light for 3 or 4 seconds. Well, he thought it was alien spacecraft or whatever, but of course it was a fireball. And so these things do happen. But I've certainly yet to... I mean, the statistics, for me, indicate that 90% of the stuff I come across can't be explained. But that doesn't mean to say that in the process of time that science may well find an explanation for us which will fit.
Right.
Yeah.
You guys ever look at the Black Knight satellite?
Yes, I have.
That's interesting stuff right there. Yeah, John, what do you think of the Black Knight satellite?
I'm hoping you gentlemen with your much experience in matters such as that will tell me what the hell that is, because because I don't know. Black Knight, obviously it's a satellite, so I get marks for that. Yes.
You're look. It's a Black Knight in the satellite. You're absolutely right.
So is it a covert thing, or is it something that
we don't know? We don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody
No.
knows what this thing is, John. It's a satellite. It's black. It looks like it's like a stealth bombers type satellite. Right. It's floating above in space. Nobody claims to own it. Nobody knows what it is. It seems
the crazy thing. It's been in orbit for at least that we know of. We've known about it since the 1920s.
Yes, they claim 12,000 years. Actually.
Yeah,
that's what they think. Yeah.
Some people think it's a sort of a monitoring device, because I when you referred to it as a Black Knight satellite, I really didn't know what you meant by that, but I know that occasionally that I've come across newspaper articles relating to this strange space junk that's been orbiting the Earth for a long time, and nobody knows what it is. So
well, it's not just orbiting. That's the whole problem. It actually has a unique orbit, to say the least. It's in a polar orbit that goes counterclockwise, which is contrary to every other satellite that humanity itself has ever launched.
And the craziest part is they've tried to get near it, and usually when they get close to it,
it moves away.
It either moves away or there's technical failure on the spacecraft.
They got recent footage. That's why I brought it up, guys. There's something on YouTube recently. They came close. They came close to it with recent footage lately.
Oh, really?
Really? Could you cut and paste that link into Skype so we could take a look at it? Because I've been following the Black Knight stuff for a long time, and
I haven't even got a chance to look at it yet. I just glanced at it. It was some guy did a 15-minute YouTube, and there's only about 3 minutes of footage on it. I'll get the link. Hang on.
Okay.
Yeah, link that to us. Definitely want to check that out.
Absolutely. I know Philip K. Dick, who is a very, very prolific author, actually says to have communicated with the Black Knight satellite, which caused him to author a couple of different books. I don't know if I'm totally there with him on that one, but there's records of it that even when Tesla was testing out some of his technology,
correct,
and dealing with some of the radio technology that Edison and Fermi were working on, they kept on getting echoes back, but with a significant time delay. So
interesting, yeah.
I find this more than fascinating, to say the least.
And of course, the anomalies that we often see from that have been released by NASA, some of those are incredible.
The photos from NASA are more than interesting. It is not a piece of space junk. It is. No. Especially when it's in orbit, in polar orbit, and when something tries to get near it, it moves away, and it's been doing this constantly. If it was something made by humanity, it would have run out of fuel by now.
I know a short time ago, a colleague of mine who's oddly, he's a British guy, ex-pilot, and he's met all of the astronauts, and he's very interested in meteorites and space rocks and things, and he knows all the guys. He's still there, by the way. Hello.
Yeah,
Yes,
we're all here.
I'm getting some strange noises, like somebody's just picked up a glass of beer. And
so what's going on is we have James Swagger here sharing. He's sharing the link to the YouTube video that we were talking about.
Picked up a drink. I was going to say.
Well, it's almost 3 in the morning. It's almost 3 in the morning here, so I can imagine the time over there, James. Right, so it's probably time to get a drink.
Nearly 8 o'clock in the morning, and the sun's out, which is pretty fantastic thing in England to see the sun. So we have great celebrations for that. But going back to the NASA images, the one that really that really set me was it was explained away as a rock structure on the desert floor, and it looked just like a whale's skeleton. And that's really
that's interesting.
Just incredible,
How much of the what's going on Mars do you think that we're being told that, and what we're not being told?
Well, there's so many artifacts on Mars, and we mustn't forget that of course, there's also a lot of artifacts on the Moon, which have been forgotten about.
Speaking of which, have you seen the Mona Lisa alien footage for the Apollo 20 mission in the 70s?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
By the way, wait 3 weeks, folks. Wait 3 weeks, and you'll all get in on this. It turns out my girlfriend's father, he finally admitted he used to work for NASA. So I'm hoping to, and he actually saw that video, and that's one of our LEM modules. I showed him the Apollo 20 video while I was having dinner at his house, and he's like, "Yeah, that's not staged. That's a real LEM module that you're seeing on that Apollo 20 YouTube video."
Yeah.
He's just
one of the videos you can actually see the astronaut's face in the video as it pans from the astronaut. He's playing with like a camera or something, and it pans from him over to the alien on the table or the Mona Lisa being. John, what are your thoughts on that? Because that is, I think, really amazing footage if authentic. I mean that.
Put the link in the box, guys. What is this thing?
Just YouTube Apollo 20.
Or Mona Lisa alien, and that's how you'll find everything on there. And I'll send you some more links later where you can actually see the astronaut's face. But listen, guys, we're actually almost out of time. And John,
good God, no!
We have to have you. We have to have you back on soon. You've been just an awesome guest to have on the show here. I know James.
There's so much I haven't told you, but I will look forward to speaking to you again. And I am pleased that I unintentionally stumbled across you last night. But it's great for you to invite me on the show, and thank you so much.
No, thank you for making time for us.
No.
Again,
by the way, we still have 5+ minutes if we want to get into this, by the way, folks.
We'll get into it in a second, but I do want to give John enough time to plug his website and
absolutely.
And the book and all that stuff before it gets too late. John, give everybody your web links, anything that you want to promote.
Well, if anybody wants to contact me, as I say, I'm always here. You can find the details of me on the internet, but my email details are John, JOHN, DAWN, which is John Dawn 1 at sky.com. Or if you look on Amazon.com, Amazon.co.uk, and the other websites, you'll see Haunted Skies books. And we've worked hard at them. And the thing is, we've made nothing and don't expect to make anything. But what we have done is recorded some pretty interesting stuff. And all I'll say is that if people buy the books, and if they think the books are rubbish, please tell me. But I think they'll really enjoy them, and that's as much as I can do, really.
It looks like a wonderful read. I can't wait to actually. I'm going to order one on Amazon and get me a copy so I can check it out. So next time you're on this show.
I just say I do publish my own books now in colour, and if I didn't publish them in colour, there's no way a publisher would publish books of 600 pages with hundreds of images in them. So that's great. I'm pleased with the product. If anybody, but just before you go, what I do need is if anybody's interested in helping us with any illustrations, because we've worn out too many illustrators over the years. If anybody wants to help us, they'll be more than welcome. And if they want to put a photograph of their dog or cat or whatever in the book, they can. I'm being serious now. I mean, we appreciate how much help people have given us, but the opportunity is there if people want to contact us.
Oh, definitely. And we'll give them, again, a way to contact you just in case anybody's interested.
Plug it again.
I'm on Facebook. I'm Haunted Skies Facebook and John Hanson on Facebook or John Dawn1 at sky.com. But our details are on there. Just stick in John Hanson UFO and you'll find us. And of course, cool. John Hanson was the first president of the United States, wasn't he? Did you gentlemen know that?
Wait. Did you just say first president of the United States?
He was indeed for 6 months.
Explain that to him, yeah. Explain that to Mr. Allen here, who I don't think is aware of his historical facts.
Yeah.
Really?
Then he got sacked. I think. So.
Well, at least he didn't get assassinated. Sacked is one thing, assassinated is another.
Yes. Nice speaking to you, John. I hope to get you on my show pretty soon.
Yeah, I'll speak to you soon, James. Okay.
Yeah. Both of you. It was great hearing from both of you and talking to you. And by the way, to all those listeners who did not call in, you guys need to call in the next time these guys are on to talk with them as well.
Okay. John, I will contact you shortly with getting you booked back on the show here because, again, it's been just a fabulous 2 hours. Sadly, it goes by so quick here on Skywatchers Radio, and it's a shame because we do have a lot to cover, and I really want to get you back on the show to talk about this Mona Lisa video because this could blow the whole lid off of this thing if this is proven to be authentic. And this has been floating around the internet for the last couple of years, and not enough people are talking about it, which gets me. Like, why aren't people focusing in on this video? Like, I would.
They're being told not to.
But if I was doing a video show somewhere, which, I don't have the face for TV, I'm sorry, everybody listening, I have a face for radio, but if I was to do a TV show based on ufology, this is the one video I'd be talking about constantly.
Yeah.
It's amazing footage. It's amazing footage. But John, again, thank you so much. And James, plug your show on here on the network when people can listen into your show.
Oh, Capricorn Radio, Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern and Fridays at 6 p.m. Eastern. And I'm also on the Dark Matter Radio Network as well. But CapricornRadio.com for my show and CapricornMembers.com as well for the archives. And I hope to have John on pretty soon.
Okay, thank you. So I sign off now, gentlemen. Okay.
John, pleasure talking. We'll talk again soon, sir.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Cheers. Bye.
Be well.
All right, everybody. This has been just a blast having John on and James and everybody listening in. Again, like Alan said, shame on you for not calling in. You should definitely call in next time, especially now that we're on the overnight hour, 1 a.m. to 3 every Tuesdays. Or Wednesday, technically, I guess. Wednesday, Some parts Wednesday, some parts Tuesdays. Yeah, it depends on where you are.
Yeah, depending on your time zone, absolutely.
Correct. Yeah, Wednesday, Tuesday, whatever. Point is, we're live overnight, so please, interact with us. Call us next time. Join in on the show. It's always a blast to have you guys interacting with us. So for everybody on the network, Dark Matter Radio Network, everybody on PSN Radio, for Keith Rowland, our webmaster and chief in charge, I want to thank you all and bid you a nice evening or good morning, whatever. Take care, everybody. The last 50 to 100 years, which one really stands out in your mind as the most important case that you researched?
Well, I've certainly looked at many in places like Australia, and also some of the incidents in the United States absolutely fascinate me. But some of the most important ones over here have been with pilots that I've interviewed, and a classic case is, is a guy called Flight Lieutenant James Salandin, who's a personal friend of mine to this present day. And Jimmy Salandin, he sighted a saucer-shaped object from the cockpit of his vampire jet, back in 1954. And after he'd landed, he told the intelligence officer, a friend of his called Derek Dempster, who was in fact the first editor of Flying Saucer Review. I don't know if you've heard of Flying Saucer Review.
Oh, definitely. Yep.
Yeah, well, I actually met Gordon Creighton, the editor, and
okay.
He made me a consultant, which means actually, as we say over here, bugger all, I suppose. But because the magazine's folded many years ago, but it was a privilege to meet people like that, because he's been doing it for many years. And going back to the sighting, this was reported to the intelligence officer, and then reported to the Prince Philip's equerry, his secretary, and Prince Philip was appraised of the sighting. So, I mean, royalty has been very interested in UFOs ever since, and protocol demands that I cannot tell you who actually reads our books as well. But yeah, but
really?
They are read. They are read, and I'm proud of that fact, and that people, judge me rational, sane, and logical, rather than a crackpot. And unfortunately, in this business, there are some crackpots, and these.
Oh, definitely.
These are not the witnesses. These are not the UFO witnesses at all. These are people involved in researching the phenomena.
Well, that, and there's also a lot of, I believe. There's a lot of misinformation people that are purposely put out there in the public just to spread misinformation, to keep us kind of out of the loop of what really might be going on. It's kind of like the magician act, you know what I mean? Misdirection.
Yes, I agree with you, and because I tend to see it as keeping the cauldron boiling,
right,
simmering away. You know as well as I do that specifically, if there are a number of sightings of UFOs, that there will be additional sightings involving some outlandish claims and allegations. But of course, most people would then not believe any of it at all. This is the sad part about all of this, is that. I mean, we can see the wood for the trees. Other people don't seem to be interested at all, but the facts do speak for themselves, and the evidence speaks for itself. You talk about Roswell, and the evidence there. If this went before a court, you know what the verdict would be. But unfortunately, it is still. It is still in the main ignored, but how can you ignore such a fantastic phenomena? And as I think your colleague might have said, he is skeptical of some things. Well,
yeah, absolutely.
Even if you're a skeptic, even if you don't believe in UFOs, which is a pretty bizarre thing to say now, but if you don't believe in them at all, what you have to admit is that it is the greatest phenomena of all modern day times. Because of the fact that so many people worldwide, for a very long time now, have reported similar experiences. And of course, one thing I have observed with UFOs is that the behavior characteristics of UFOs.
And we are back live on Skywatchers Radio. Welcome back, everybody. Again, we are live now with John Hanson, and I want to welcome him to the show and say just really what a pleasure it is to be able to meet you, talk to you, and really to thank you. I want to thank you right off the bat because it's really, really early in the morning where you are right now, and you stayed up to be on this show, and I really appreciated it, and I really want to say that right off the bat, sir.
Thank you. That was the least I could do as we blundered into each other unintentionally many hours ago. But it's worth staying up all night for the pleasure.
And it really was kind of a funny situation, but we're here now, and we have a lot of people listening in, John, and I really wanted to kind of get a little bit of your backstory, because you started off as a police officer. How did you go from a police officer to somebody interested in the subject of ufology and UFOs?
Right. Well, I did nearly 30 years with the police, and half of it was in the CID, or Detective Division. And in 1995, just after I'd retired from the force, I was actually, it was a pivotal sort of time in my life when I was lying on the settee watching X-Files, and there was an Iraqi pilot that chased a UFO. So, I watched this, and to me, it wasn't reality at all. But I enjoyed watching the X-Files, and the phone rang, and my son, he's a serving officer now. He was then a police constable, and now he's a chief inspector. So that shows you how much time has elapsed. He told me, he said, "Look, Dad, you got not only Britain, but also in the United States, involving police officers that allegedly followed Venus." Well, this wasn't right at all. And sort of from the 24th to the 29th of October, every half an hour somebody had seen something. And I actually tracked down 2 police officers that had chased these objects down in Devon, in the West Country of England. Went to meet them personally, interviewed them, and interviewed so many others, and it was pretty clear from the stories that these people gave me, this wasn't Venus or a weather balloon or whatever. I mean, I don't think we have many weather balloons over here, but it clearly was a cross-shaped object. So the flying cross was a short-lived phenomenon, both in the States and in England. But of course, the flying cross, in my opinion, represented part of an object, only part of the object. And as I say, these things have been seen in various guises for many years. So that's what myself and my partner decided to do, was write it up. But easier said than done. And but we are proud of what we've written, and we've not made any money out of it, and we in fact lost money. But I'm very passionate about this, because this is social history. This is our own social history and yours, and we have a right. It should be recorded rather than kicked into the bin.
John, you know what's funny about that? In about, I would say, a couple of years, maybe 50 years after disclosure happens, there are going to be books written about our real history, and it's going to rewrite the history that we've been force-fed for the last couple hundred years. And you're absolutely right. This is part of our real history.
Amen. Amen.
The Roswell crash, I believe that happened. I believe that's part of our historical fact, and all that stuff will be in the records. There's so many different cases though that have happened over the
I believe it, but he said I've seen a flying saucer. So of course, my reply to him was fairly caustic and quite profane, because I thought he was pulling my leg. And the next day he came to see me, and he told me what had happened, and briefly, following a number of reports of objects being seen over the city centre, Birmingham city centre, a doctor saw this object disappear behind some trees, and my son, who was with a policewoman, went to have a look, and obviously pretty sceptical, and he saw this saucer-shaped object surrounded with a blue field of energy with a thin, rippling red line running through it. And within seconds, it shrank into itself and disappeared. And that was the trigger, if you like, because prior to then, all of the years I'd been in the force, I'm sorry, but if somebody had come up to me and said, I wanted to report a flying saucer or a UFO, I would have thought that A, they probably had too much to drink, or B, they certainly deserved some psychiatric treatment. So I was naive, I was ignorant, and it was only from that time onwards that I was curious enough to find out if there was any foundation to such reports. And I'm still researching now, all of these years later, and it's taken me this time to eventually do what I always wanted to do, was publish some books which are reliant on a day-by-day account of UFO activity. So I'm not talking about random UFO accounts. This is day-by-day, and it took us all of these years to put together, and we've been pretty thorough. Now,
when you say a day-by-day account, expand on that a little bit.
Well, let me say, during 1967, in October 67, there was a huge wave of sightings, not only in Great Britain,